Hello, my name is Justin, and this is fairy tale number 5, The Goose That Laid the Golden Egg. Emily and Daniel lived on a little farm, high up in the mountains. They were poor, but they were happy. They had a goat that gave them creamy milk, and hens and geese that gave them fresh eggs. Every morning, Daniel got up to collect the eggs and take them down to the village to sell. But one morning, as he was plucking eggs out of the straw, he picked up one that was cool and heavy, and not at all like the others. He rubbed his eyes, blinked, and stared at it, completely perplexed. Soon the mysterious egg was lying, shining brightly on the kitchen table, with Emily and Daniel gazing down at it. "It looks like gold," Emily said slowly, "but it couldn't actually be gold, could it?" There was only one way to find out. Daniel took it to the village goldsmith, who peered at it, tapped it with a hammer, and handed it back to him with a grin. "That," said the goldsmith, "is a solid gold egg. I'll give you 100 gold coins for it." In a daze, Daniel took the bag full of coins, more money than he had ever seen in his life, and walked through the village, buying a dress, shoes, and hat for Emily. He ran back to their farm, his arms full of presents. Emily was overjoyed. She put on all her new clothes, and they danced around their yard, astounded at their good fortune. The next morning, Daniel walked nervously into the henhouse to collect the eggs. There, nestled in the straw, was another shining golden egg, next to a perfectly ordinary-looking white goose. "It's incredible!" Daniel shouted, and he ran all the way to the village to sell the egg to the goldsmith. The next day, the goose laid another shiny gold egg, and the day after that, sure enough, she laid another one. Soon Daniel and Emily were rich beyond their wildest dreams. They bought beautiful new clothes. They employed servants to do all the work on the farm, and they moved to a much bigger house with an enormous orchard. At first, their new life seemed perfect, but after a while, they wondered if their house was big enough. "We need more rooms," Emily sighed. 15 just isn't enough. "We need one for my dresses, one for our books, one for my musical instruments, one to sleep in, one for your musical instruments, and at least 3 for the servants." Daniel looked around him and realized that the house, which had seemed so huge, was actually tiny. "We'll have to move," he said, frowning. "What we really need is a massive house with a large park around it, so that people next door can't stare in at us all the time." Emily and Daniel thought about it and decided that they needed at least 50 rooms. "That's settled," said Emily. "Let's move as soon as possible." "We can't," Daniel said gloomily. "We simply don't have enough money." Daniel and Emily walked into the henhouse and looked down at the little white goose. "If the goose keeps laying 1 egg a day," said Daniel, "it'll take us years to be able to pay for the mansion we need." "Lots of the other geese lay 2, 3, or 4 eggs a day," said Emily. "Why can't this goose lay more than 1? The goose looked up at them, annoyed. They glared back. "There's no solution," Emily said finally. "We'll just have to make do." But at breakfast the next morning, Daniel jumped up from the table. "Every day the goose lays a golden egg," he said. "But where does the gold come from?" Emily looked at Daniel, puzzled. "Don't you see?" he said. "The goose must be full of gold." "Of course," said Emily. "We just need to get it." They both rushed to the hen house. Emily took hold of the goose, while Daniel struck it on the head and killed it. "Inside the goose, we're going to find more gold than we've ever seen," Daniel murmured. But when he cut it open, his face fell. There was no gold inside. Emily turned to him with a face like thunder. "Daniel, what have you done?" "Well, it wasn't me who insisted on a new house," shouted Daniel. "Well, it wasn't me who had the brilliant idea of killing the goose," Emily yelled back. They started to argue. They were still arguing the next day, the day after that. With no more golden eggs, soon Daniel and Emily were as poor as they had ever been. But now, instead of being happy, they were miserable. Every morning Daniel went down to the hen house to collect the eggs, muttering angrily to himself. And as he picked the eggs up out of the straw, his heart held a tiny hope that one of them might just be made of gold. But it never was. The end. Thank you, and bye-bye.